Well, good morning, church. It's great to see you on this long weekend. I have a question for you. You ready? Are you an overthinker? Now, you might be an overthinker if you have ever laid awake at night replaying a conversation that you had years ago, creating better comebacks that would have changed the trajectory of your own life. You might be an overthinker if you've ever written a text message several times, deleted it, and then sent it anyway, immediately regretting all of your life choices. You might be an overthinker if you've ever taken longer to decide where to go out and eat than it would have taken to just cook a meal from scratch. And if you're an overthinker, you might be able to relate to this post that came up on my social media feed a few weeks ago. Do you all ever wonder what life would be like if you didn't overthink everything? I think about it all of the time. Oh, there you are. I see you're awake. There we go. You know what? I laughed so hard when I first read that. Now, maybe you're sitting here and you're like, I don't know, Pastor Jessica. I don't know. I don't think I'm an overthinker. The simplest test I've ever found to determine if you struggle with this negative loop in your life is this one. See, if you're an overthinker, then this has shown up on your computer before, and you've sat back and you've thought, that looks like a stoplight. That's definitely a traffic light. There could be a traffic light in the background, and definitely there's a traffic light right here, but does that include it? Should I click that box? And you've stared at those pixels for quite some time before you clicked that little skip button, only to be given a picture of some bicycles and asked to choose the boxes that the bicycles are in. The truth is, friends, we don't just overthink. We often overanalyze, we overfeel, and eventually we're tempted to undermove. Now, we're in this series called Soundtracks, and we're talking about these soundtracks, these negative mental loops that go on in all of our minds that shape how we think, how we feel, how we act. Now, last week, Pastor Jonathan helped us understand what to do when we're making our decisions based out of fear. If you missed it, you're going to want to go back. It was fantastic. It will help you. Today, we're going to talk about what to do when you can't make a decision because you're stuck in a loop of overthinking. Now, we often think that overthinking looks something like this: a jumbled mess of our thoughts crashing into each other. Anyone have that going on right now? You're not even paying attention to me. You've got 500 other things that you're thinking about. And if I say something brilliant, maybe you'll pay attention, but there's so much going on in your mind. Just a whole bunch of mess of what you're going to do. In reality, though, I think overthinking looks more like this. I think overthinking is thoughts that follow connected pathways that feel random, but really aren't random. See, you might receive a simple text from your partner, and it might say, what do you want to do for dinner? And that can trigger a chain reaction in your mind. Some of you are smiling since you've gone through this. See, you realize there's no food at home. Then you think about, someone has to go grocery shopping. I went last time. It's their turn. And then you think about the dinner plans you're having later this week with friends that you've been trying to avoid and you didn't want to do that. And all of a sudden you start feeling frustration, you feel anxiety, you feel awkward about the interaction that's about to come. And so what do? You text back your partner and say, whatever, you figure it out. And all of a sudden they're left thinking, what did I do? I just asked what we're having for dinner. We often think of overthinking as random, but I don't think it is. It usually actually masks deeper emotions that are going on under the surface. It might present as anxiety, but under the surface, it's probably linked to one of these emotions. The truth is, we're prone to overthinking when we attempt to process our pain or negative feelings without being fully honest about what they are. Because overthinking lets us deal in the currency of details. And some of us love details. We live in the land of details. We hate feeling anything. And so overthinking can help us prevent us from feeling the deepness and the rawness of our hurt and our pain, especially if we let one thought jump us to another thought, jump us to another thought. Now, there's a story in the Bible of a guy named Moses. You may have heard of his story before. It's famous. He was born into the world when Pharaoh and the Egyptians were lording over the Israelite people. The Israelites were their slaves. And during this time, Pharaoh starts to get very nervous that too many babies are being born to the Israelites. And so he decides to kill all Israelite baby boys, a massacre of an entire generation that will ensure those babies do not grow up to overtake Egypt. Now, Moses is one of those babies, but his mother is brilliant, and she's led by God to hide her son. And in an absolute miracle that can only come from God's hand, Moses is adopted into the house of Pharaoh, and he's raised as a prince. Now, eventually Moses grows into a young adult, and his eyes are open to the corruption that has been going on. Moses discovers he is not a prince of Egypt. Rather, he was born as a despised Israelite. In that moment, his perspective completely changes, and he ends up killing an Egyptian, and he runs to the desert. He's burdened, he's broken, he's alone, he's frustrated, he's sad, he's grieving, he's likely overwhelmed. All of these would be good words to describe Moses' state of mind. But God is very kind to Moses. And Moses settles in this land called Midian. And there he marries, and he has a child, a son, and he becomes a shepherd. So Moses learns to tend to sheep, which is a far cry from sitting on a throne. But the Israelites, his people, are still in pain and bondage back in Egypt. They're still forced to live as slaves. And the Bible tells us that God has not forgotten about them. The Bible says years passed and the king of Egypt died. But the Israelites continued to groan under their burden of slavery. They cried out for help, and their cry rose up to God. And he remembered his covenant promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He looked down on the people of Israel, and he knew that it was time to act. And so Moses one day is up in the mountains tending to the flock of sheep, and something extraordinary happens. Like, if Moses had doubted God before, and I think it would be hard after what God had done, saved him as an infant. There's no way after this that Moses can possibly doubt God. This is what happens. It says, one day Moses was tending to the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, which is the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of the bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it did not burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Moses is already talking to himself. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I've heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. I'm aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians, and I will lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians have been abusing them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt. Now, something really interesting is happening here. It's as if God is in mid-conversation with Moses. God says, I have certainly seen oppression of my people in Egypt. Yes, Moses, I am aware of their suffering. This is the first clue that Moses has had some kind of conversation loop going on. Maybe it's with God. Maybe it's just in his mind, and God has interrupted what's going on in his mind. And so God interrupts his thoughts, and he says, yes, Moses, I'm going to free my people. I'm going to send you. Amazing, right? Wrong. Moses is not happy about this. He begins to spiral immediately. The Bible says Moses protested to God, and he said, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people out of Egypt? It's so interesting. Moses is trying to control the situation from the very beginning. He doesn't ask, who are you, God? He says, who am I? As if he's so important that he's going to be the one to do the work. He's overthinking. And overthinking is really just fake control. Many of us are tempted to flip into overthinking because we want to stay in control of what's going on. We want to manage our situation. We want to figure out what's going on. We want to be in control. But overthinking does not give us control. It actually just gives us more anxiety because overthinking is attempting to play God. And if you read any part of the Bible, you'll quickly realize that you're not supposed to do that. And so we imagine every outcome, every failure, every possible what if, yet none of that actually moves us forward. Does it? It doesn't help us take any types of step. What I love about God is he graciously answers Moses' ridiculous response at playing God. And so God says to him, Moses, I will be with you. You hear the kindness in God's voice? And this is a sign that I am the one who has sent you. So almost as if he's reminding Moses of who God is. Like, it's me, Moses. Don't worry, you don't have to do anything. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very moment. That's crazy. This moment is so far away from Egypt. It's going to take a miracle to get them out of Egypt, and then a miracle to get them to the mountain that Moses is standing on. But God says, I will do it. I will save my people, and they will be on this mountain. Translation, don't worry, Moses. I've got it. But Moses continues to worry. Now, I know this is completely unrelatable. None of you worry, but this is the Bible, so I think we'll keep going if that's okay with you. So it says Moses protested and he said, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me, they will ask, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? You know what Moses is doing here? Moses is inventing a scenario that hasn't even happened yet. Because overthinking creates problems that don't even exist. He's solving a problem of an imaginary situation that he has no facts or no data is actually going to happen. See, instead of just choosing to trust God at his word, Moses is running through possible worst case scenarios so he can be ready for anything. As if God can't prepare him, Moses needs to prepare himself. See, instead of trusting God, he's running through these scenarios. Overthinking. This is what it does to us. It gives us a false sense of security and insight into our own situations, but it's false. Have you ever imagined a full-blown argument that's never happened? Maybe you're driving in your car and you're thinking about a coworker, your partner, your friend. I know none of you, but just imagine that you're having this conversation in your mind. You're already replaying. You're delivering zingers that you would never say to them in person. This scenario isn't real, but your heart is racing in your car like you're actually in the scenario. Maybe you've thought about asking someone for help before, and then you stopped yourself before even asking because in your head they've already said no to you. You already know 10 reasons why they will say no. You've played out the rejection. You understand how it's going to feel, and so you don't even attempt to ask someone to help you. Maybe you've thought about going on a trip. A bucket list trip, somewhere you've always wanted to go. And all of a sudden, as you start to plan, you think about all the scenarios that could happen. You could lose your passport, your kids could not want to go, you could get sick, you could lose your hotel, and all of a sudden you just stop and you don't even do anything about it. That's what overthinking does to us. It tells us that our worry is making us responsible, but really it's just making us safe and stuck. We feel safe, but we're actually just stuck. It creates scenarios that aren't actually happening, and it makes us unprepared to deal with the life that actually is happening. This is what Moses is doing. He's imagining scenarios, not even thinking about who God is, because those excuses are going to keep him stuck in Midian even longer. Moses doesn't need more what ifs. Moses needs a plan, because overthinking is just under planning. Now, I'm going to speak to the Christians in the room for a second. If you're not a follower of Jesus, this one, you don't even have to pay attention to this one. If you call yourself a follower of Jesus, what I've found in 20 years of pastoring is followers of Jesus have this tendency, Christians have this tendency of saying, I'm going to pray about it. And I believe in prayer. I believe in the power of prayer. But I think sometimes this statement, I'm going to pray about it, is often just an excuse to do nothing. It's almost as if we make inaction a spiritual discipline in our lives. We're locked into something. We're not moving. I'm going to pray about it, but really I'm just not going to do anything about it. The truth is Moses needed to stop thinking. He needed to start planning. He needed some goals that would actually guide his next steps
What?
in
Goals?
life.
Goals? Did I hear somebody say goals and planning?
Hey,
Let's
Pat.
go, baby.
Okay. We're in the middle of a gathering. But
sorry.
No, come on up. Because
Okay.
you can help. Because Pat, if you don't know Pat, Pat's one of our elders. He is just an amazing individual. You've probably seen him around the church. He leads groups. He leads marriage ministry. He leads prayer. And you are one of the most positive people, probably the most positive person I have ever met. The most energy, honestly, that I've ever met in anyone. You make things happen in your life. You make things happen in your work. You're incredibly successful. You make things happen in your family. You make things happen here at the church. And so I wonder, it looks really easy, like it comes easy to you. I wonder if it actually is. Maybe it is, or maybe it's a little bit more difficult than that.
So I got a story. So I'll share
Okay.
it with you. So I would say that just like Moses, he murdered someone. He found out his true.
Pause.
Sorry.
Just like Moses, did you murder someone?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Call
Good.
the security.
You can keep going. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Just like Moses, you understand.
Yeah,
Okay.
so just like Moses had to pivot,
Okay.
he murdered someone. He also found out his true identity and ran. So I would just take us back a little bit. Back in 1986, a long time ago, I was 26 years old, and I got into real estate. And I had 3-4 really great years running, selling, doing really great. And in 1990, if anybody can remember, we hit the recession. We had double-digit inflation. We had double-digit interest rates. And I remember I had 2 young kids at that time, and I remember things shifted. I remember going into the office, and the phones stopped ringing.
It's not good.
And I didn't know what to do. I had 3-4 really good years. I had just bought a house in the beach area. Our kids were young. My wife was doing some daycare, and I did not save a lot. And I remember that my income dropped from the year before to that year to 1/3 of what I had made the year before. And I was broke. I remember I didn't know what to do. I remember I had $5 in my pocket. I had to meet a client to go do a showing. That's all I had. And I had to put in like 1/8 of a tank of gas. I don't know if anybody's ever been there,
Yep.
but I was. And I remember as well that my son was like 5 years old, Andrew, and he was sick. And I had to buy penicillin for him, and I didn't have $20 to buy the penicillin. And here I am, a realtor. I had bought this house in the beach area. I was successful, but went through a difficult time, just like Moses did. And I had to call my dad for $20 for that penicillin. So I knew I had to change things around, and I went to a seminar about goal setting. And they said, what you can do is start setting some business goals. And what I did was I got a big 16 by 20 inch Bristol board,
Okay.
put it up on my bedroom wall. Juanita, my wife, saw it all the time, and gave myself gold and silver stars as I achieved some business goals. And I started to achieve it. I started to see some change in my life because I started to be consistent. And then that next year, I turned things around, and I was in the top 3 in my company in production the next year.
Wow.
But what I had to do as well is I started to implement other goals in my area, like family goals and fitness goals and friendship goals and so on and so forth.
Now, you make it sound really, like I think a lot of people can relate to that. I know I found myself in seasons where I know I need to set goals. It just feels so overwhelming. I wonder, did you ever get stuck in the overthinking loop? Like, is this going to happen? And I'm unsure. What should I do?
Absolutely. I mean, I still sometimes overthink or worry because we're human, right?
Yeah.
We get unsure, we're uncertain. But I would say some of the things to do is really just to trust God and pray. Pray for God's direction and guidance. Also to, lean on Scripture, meditate on Scripture. I'm a really structured guy, so in the mornings I usually work out at 7, and then I'm back and I start to get into prayer and meditation before I start the day. Practical ways are really listening to positive podcasts, things that you can fill your mind with and your body and your soul and your spirit with something that's good, that's going to turn things around. As well, you've probably heard that we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So if we're spending time with people who are negative or pulling you down, it might be time to pivot and change and to be around people who encourage you and build you up for yourself and in the Lord.
That's fantastic. Now, you make it sound really easy. I know it hasn't been. I know it's been incredibly tough for you. If somebody was sitting here and they're like, I need to do this. I need to start some goals. Like, I need to set some goals in my life. Is there steps you took, or maybe a way you could suggest that we take some steps in our lives?
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, when I started setting goals, I started to implement business goals. And you might have heard this term, the reticular activator system. God has created us to be an amazing being. And it's part of our brain that the things that we think about, sometimes we're drawn to. Just like when you might be thinking about buying a new car, and on the street you start to see that same model, that same make. Or maybe you're pregnant and you start to see all the other new moms or the new children. So we're drawn to that. And what I started to do is I started to just implement these goals in my life. And I have different steps about it.
So step number 1, what do we do?
Step number 1 is to write it out.
Okay.
So there's power with pen to paper. If you write out your goals, what I was doing was I would write them out, and the key is not to just write them out in January, but it's to write them out and review them, and I'll get to that in a moment.
I think a lot of people are guilty of that, writing out some goals and then...
Yeah, absolutely. So what I started to do was I started to implement these different areas of my life, not just business, but marriage, because I've been married 45 years.
Whoa, good job, woo!
And you got to work on that. And then you got family goals, and we also have spiritual goals, fitness goals, and also financial goals, and we also have investment goals, 3-year goals, 5-year goals, and so on and so forth. And just to implement that, and it's very spiritual. It's very biblical. It says, "Commit your way to the Lord, and He will establish your paths. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." So I started to implement those and write them out.
So write it out. What do we do next? Once I've written out my goals and I've looked at them, what do I do?
The key is review. Review, because a lot of times people will write these goals out January 1st, throw them in a drawer, never see them again.
Yeah.
For me, what I started to do is I wrote them out in this template I created. So I used to go from a Bristol board, then I went to a spiral workbook, and then I created this template that has goals in every area of my life. Then I would have monthly goals and weekly goals. I review them every month, the beginning of the month, and then I review them every Monday. I write them out over and over again. So it becomes a part of what I'm thinking and desiring. And does every goal come to pass? No, maybe God's closing that door. But if we desire it and it's something good and great, then God starts to open the door. And here's the thing. I remember I started doing these goals when my kids were like 4 and 7 and 8 years old. And I started doing goals with them. I said, guys, we're going to sit down and going to write some goals. And the goals can be, what do you want to achieve in school? What grade do you want to go? What sport do you want to achieve?
Now, I'm sure they loved it, right?
They hated it.
Okay, yeah.
They hated it.
They sound like my kids.
Yeah, they said, Dad, I don't want to write out goals. No way. But I said, we're going to do it. And so year after year, in January and at the beginning of the school year, we would write down our goals. And as they became teenagers, they started to bring their friends. We would order pizza and have these goal-setting days. And then as they became young adults, they started to bring their colleagues over, and we would have this round table time of setting goals at the beginning of the year, especially at that point in their life. And now my kids are at 38 and 42, and they're successful business owners and entrepreneurs. If you go into their home, you'll see journals, goal-setting tabs on their wall, goal-setting books, and they've achieved great things because God has guided them and led them, and it's become part of their life.
That's amazing. Okay, so we write it out. We review it. What's next after we've done that?
Reward yourself. If you have a small goal, reward yourself. Take yourself out for lunch or dinner. Or maybe it's a big goal. Buy that car you've been dreaming of. Or maybe you want to start a ministry, something you want to give back on. Something that's inside of your heart and being that you want to achieve. And God is leading you down that pathway. Reward yourself.
Now, when me and you were talking about this, you shared something that I thought was really important, that 4th step for us as followers of Jesus. And what is that?
So listen, let's see what God can do. I think as we get older, and even if you're young, sometimes we forget to dream. Sometimes we forget to dream. So what's your dream? What do you want to change in your life? And I challenge you to dig down deep inside. And maybe you've suppressed that dream. Maybe it's like down in the crevices of your soul that you forgot about it. And now's the time to bring it back out. And I love the quote that Rich Wilkerson says, that sight is what you see when your eyes are open. But vision is what you see when your eyes are closed. So cast a vision today. Dig deep and see what God is going to do in your life. Dream some big dreams. And at the end of this year and next year, you look back and say, look what God has done for me.
Pat, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for being such a great leader in our community. We're just so grateful for you. And man, I wish I had a Pat to come around with me everywhere. I'd be setting some crazy goals. So thank you so much. Appreciate
Let's
you.
go.
Now, Pat mentioned he has created this template. We're going to actually make that available to you. So our team's put it together. You're going to be able to download it on the QR code. It's just such an easy way to start setting some goals. We all need to do this. We all need to put this into practice in our lives to make a plan and take some movement. Now, going back to our story of Moses, this conversation keeps going on, overlooping in Moses' mind. At one point, God tells Moses, don't worry, Moses, I'm going to perform some miracles for you. I'm going to take your staff and turn it into a snake. God says, put your hand in your cloak and take it out, and his hand is full of leprosy. And then God says, put it back inside and take it out, and his hand is fully healed. And if that's not enough, God then tells Moses, if they don't believe you, or they don't listen to you after those two signs, then take some water from the Nile River and pour it on the ground, and I will turn it to blood. I mean, if he's not convinced, this would convince me. Yet Moses continues, and it says that he pleads with God, and he says, oh God, I'm not very good with my words. I never have been. And now even though you are speaking to me, I get tongue-tied. My words get all tangled up. At this point, Moses' overthinking is becoming excessive, because overthinking is just excessive analysis. It's not discernment. Now, I'm a big believer in discernment. We practice discernment here at the church. We're constantly asking ourselves, not led by our feelings, but asking, where is God at work, and how can I partner with him in the work that he's doing? But friends, there is a big difference between discernment and overthinking. Discernment is rooted in God's wisdom. It leads to peace and clarity. Overthinking often leads to fear and paralysis and mistrust. When I'm discerning, God is in control and I am dependent on him. When I am overthinking, I am in control and I am independent on me. Proverbs says this, it says, trust in the Lord with all of your heart, lean not on your own understanding, and God will direct your paths. In James it says, if you lack wisdom, ask God. He gives generously. Here's the tension. Overthinking masquerades itself as wisdom. If you look around your life and realize you haven't moved, there's no increase in your trust level, you've taken no faith steps, then you're probably stuck. You're probably not discerning. Like Moses at the burning bush, you're likely stuck in the loop of what-if scenarios, overanalyzing everything, spiral. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, am I discerning or am I just looping? Am I surrendered or am I just spinning? Now, God is patient. He was with Moses. He will be with us. He listens to our doubts. He makes space for it. He makes space for our questions. He lets us have our what-if statements. But eventually, God does invite us to stop spiraling and start trusting him. And so God redirects Moses back to him and he says, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people can speak or not speak? Who decides if someone can hear or not hear? If they can see or not see? Is it not I, God? Now go. I will be with you as you speak. I will instruct you on what to say. God is inviting Moses, just trust me. He's saying this overanalyzation of the situation is not necessary. Moses, I've already decided what's going to happen. God has dismantled every one of Moses' excuse. He says, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? God says, you're not in control here, Moses. He says, if I go to the people of Israel, they're going to ask me, who are you? Who is God? God says, you're creating problems that don't even exist yet, Moses. I'm going to give you a plan to follow. Moses says, I'm not very good with my words. I get tongue-tied. My words get all tangled up. God says you're overanalyzing the situation. You're not practicing discernment. It's here that Moses ends at the bottom of his downward spiral. And eventually Moses again just pleads, Lord, please send someone else. I can hear the despair in his voice. After all of that spiraling, Moses just finally just shuts down. He's completely drained, even from any creative excuses or thoughts. He simply says, just send someone else. I'm tapped out. I'm numb. Because overthinking is paralyzed action. A lot of people can get stuck in this place when it comes to overthinking. After every scenario has played out in your mind, you're left exhausted. You're emotionally frozen. Often I've found people spiritually passive. You're apathetic to the situation. You're not even looking for God to move in your life anymore. And it's at this stage of the situation where you stop making decisions. Sometimes you even stop showing up in life. And I've been pastoring long enough to know that there's people in this room who have just stopped showing up in your life. Friends, this is a very dangerous place to be. This place of overthinking actually leads us to spiraling completely out of control. It's why God says, take captive every thought and make it obedient. Because we don't want to get ourselves into this apathetic, numb, passive space. But here's what I love about God. Even here, God doesn't leave Moses. He's frustrated with Moses, sure. If you read through the whole story, you'd hear God's frustration. He probably just wishes Moses would trust him. Sometimes I feel like this as a parent. Sometimes I go to my kid and I'm trying to help them discern a situation, and I know what's best for them. I've lived life. I know that this path would be the best option for them. And so I try and help them understand it, and I'm there for them. And they look at me sometimes with such doubt, as if like I don't want good things for their life. Sometimes they even choose the path that I told them not to take. How many of us have done that with God? That he's a good father, and we look back and we doubt his goodness. Friends, God is a perfect parent. His ways are good. They're kind. They're always for our benefit. Even when Moses doubts, God was still leading him forward to something good. And so God says, all right, what about your brother Aaron? I know he speaks well. And look, it's a miracle. Aaron's on his way to come and meet you. See, God partners with Moses. He meets Moses where he is, not where Moses should be. Moses should be past this point at this point. But Moses isn't there, so God gives him a tangible path forward. God says, what about your brother? Not only will I be with you, Moses, I'll be with Aaron too. I'm going to send someone to be with you so you know you're not alone. I'll be with you. Aaron will be with you. See, God writes Aaron, his brother, into the plan, not as a backup, but as a mercy to Moses, an act of kindness to help Moses take a next step. And God says, I will be with both of you as you speak, and I will instruct both of you in what to do. Take your shepherd's staff with you, use it to perform the miraculous signs that I will show you. It's as if God is saying, just take a step, Moses. I'm going to meet you. Trade your anxiousness, trade your overthinking for my peace. Trade your spiraling thoughts for my steady plan. Trade your need to control everything, Moses, for my complete sovereignty. I'm going to be with you. And so let me ask you, what overthinking loop are you stuck in? What emotions are happening underneath your anxious thoughts? Is there grief? Is there sadness? Is there shame? Is there exhaustion? Some of us are just tired. Is there fear? Moses was stuck in this loop. Egypt was not just a place that God was calling him to. Egypt was a place where his pain lived. Going back meant facing his past. It meant facing his loss, and there had been lots of it in his young life. No wonder why he hesitated. The what ifs and the fears nearly kept him from grabbing onto the purpose that God was offering to him. But God doesn't respond with frustration. He meets him with patience. God is present, and he just invites him to take a next step. One of my favorite promises that comes from Jesus is this one. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Jesus understands our human tendency to have these overwhelming, spiraling thoughts. But he gently calls us to trust God, to believe that God can and will provide for our lives. Maybe you're stuck in a season. Maybe you're stuck in a decision that you've been avoiding, a conversation that you need to have, maybe a calling that you have been questioning. Overthinking can mask itself like wisdom and caution, but often it's just fear wearing a disguise. We want control, we want certainty, so what we will do is we will spiral or we will freeze. But the gentle invitation from God is this: stop spinning, start stepping. God is a good, good Father. He's going to meet us the same way that he met Moses, not with pressure, but with his presence. He'll say, you're not alone. I am with you. So what's the next step that you know you need to take? What's a goal that you know you need to sit down and write in this next season? Maybe you need to name it. I need to do this. Maybe you need to review it and remind yourself. Maybe you've already written it down. You need to pull that drawer out and pull it back out and say, I'm going to commit to this. Maybe you need to tell someone. What all of us do is we all need to take a step. All of us, there's steps in our lives that we need to take. Friends, we don't need to know the whole path of our life's trajectory. We just need to trust the one who is walking alongside of us. God is with you. God goes before you. God has good things in store for your future. And God will be faithful every step of your life. Let me pray with you. And so, God, I thank you today. God, I thank you that you are patient with us, just like you were patient with Moses. God, you see every fear, every doubt, every what if that just swirls in our minds all day long, God, and still you meet us with grace. You remind us we are not alone. And you say, trust me, even when the way feels unclear or we can't see it, God. God, I think of my friends who are struggling in the cycle of overthinking, God, in a loop that seems unending. God, I pray that you would break the spiraling thoughts and replace them with peace. As we've been talking in this series about replacing our negative soundtracks with positive soundtracks, God, would you give us a positive soundtrack that would remind us of who you are? God, would you bring peace? For those of us who are paralyzed, God, who aren't even moving because of fear, God, or loss, God, or maybe even shame, God, would you remind us of your presence? Would you remind us of who we are in light of who you are? That it isn't dependent on us, Father, but you go with us and you will help us. And God, may that courage give us the courage to take a faithful step. God, help us to remember you are trustworthy. God, we do not need to have this life figured out. God, we simply need to follow you, but that requires movement on our part. So give us courage, God, to dream. Maybe for the first time, God, maybe again, we need to reignite that, God. Help us, God, set some bold, hope-filled goals for our future, God. Would you help us to create plans that are shaped, God, by your wisdom and discernment, not by our fear? Would you lead us, God, step by step? And would you remind us each day of your presence, God? You are with us. You go before us. We are not alone. God, your plans are good because you are a good, good Father. Thank you for reminding us of that today, God. And as we go into our week, would you give us the boldness and the courage to trust you? In your name, amen.